The Miami Hurricanes are going to make their college football playoff debut at noon Saturday, and we're about 72 hours away until they spot the football. I'm Manny Navarro of The Athletic. He's Carlos Ledo of the MIA All-Day podcast. Welcome back to Wide Right. Carlos, normally we'd spend an entire show breaking down the matchup between the Hurricanes and Aggies. We'd go over all the injuries, break things down position by position, really bore you to death. But we're not going to start there for two reasons. Number one, I already know what's going to happen, Carlos, because I simulated Miami, Texas A&M in the entire first round of the playoffs on the NCAA football game for my PS5. And number two, we're in the middle of free agency, and all anybody wants to know is who the next quarterback of the Hurricanes is going to be. Brother, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. I got my 90s Dolphins hat on. This is the last one I got on, so if the Canes continue to advance, I'm going to need a GoFundMe for some more Dolphins hats. Got the 90s Oakleys on, and I got my MIA All-Day sweater on. We're ready to go, bro.
Nice. I love to see it. So yes, last night you and I were texting about the show because this is what we do. We start planning. We start talking about what's next.
Well, when you say planning loosely, you just texted me, "Hey, I'm simulating the games on PS5." I'm like, "Are we doing Canes won? Awesome." That was the extent of our planning.
Yes, we started. I started simulating because I said, you know what, this college football game is pretty realistic, right? Like my daughter walked in, Jocelyn, my oldest walked in, and she's like, "Is that a real game?" Like she couldn't tell the difference that it was computer graphics. She goes, "Oh no, and I can tell it's not because the guy has a star around him on it."
Yeah,
but I had the game simulated because I wanted to see what would college football spit out, right? Like what result are we going to see here if we simulate a Miami noon kickoff at Texas A&M in a playoff game? And Carlos, got good news for you, brother. Canes won
the results are accurate.
37-28. And I got to tell you, Carson Beck was on fire as I sat there and watched parts of that game while I worked on my computer. And had a huge day throwing the football. But really, it all came down to Gerard Pringle. Ran for like 115 yards, 2 touchdowns, I think, on 15 carries. And Miami ended up kicking a bunch of field goals in the right before the half. Another one in the 2 more in the fourth quarter to basically salt it away, and they won by 9 points.
Hey, I'll take that all day long. As I've said for a very long time, PS5, NCAA 25 is a very accurate football game. Their rating systems are fantastic. They know exactly what they're doing. They've got a great AI system in their development, in their software. So I approve.
Yeah, the other results of the weekend, if you're wondering, Alabama lost at Oklahoma. The other 2 games, which we know the G5 teams are heavy underdogs, they got spanked by Oregon and Ole Miss. Tulane and James Madison did. So that's what happens when you simulate the games on PS5. I'm sure a lot of other people have done the same thing to sort of look ahead and figure out what's going to happen in this game on Saturday. But you know what? There's a lot of people picking Miami to win this game, believe it or not, Carlos.
I've seen both ways. It's really an even matchup, I would say, not only from a talent perspective, but I think in terms of the way the seasons have gone. Although A&M was undefeated until they lost to Texas, they had a couple close calls. Against Arkansas, against South Carolina. They were in a game against LSU they really shouldn't have been in. Even against Florida, wasn't a big old blowout. So for me, it's one of these situations where both teams are coming into this with something to prove. Specifically, we know Miami has something to prove, having gotten into the playoff over Notre Dame. We want to go in there. We want to prove that we deserve that spot, that we could do what Notre Dame couldn't do, which is beat A&M and beat them on the road. And also show college football that, yes, they had the hiccups in the middle of the season, but they've corrected that. They're a different team, and they're capable of pushing deep into the playoff. While A&M just really wants to get rid of that stigma of, being Texas's little brother. They're not even the best team in the state of Texas right now. Texas Tech is better than they are. They lost to Texas. So right now they're running third, and they're trying to prove that they're better than what the rankings or the playoff seeding is showing.
Yeah, both these teams have narratives around them for sure. And we're going to talk about the matchup a little bit more. We're going to talk about the transfer portal, what Miami could potentially end up doing at quarterback for next season. We're going to answer some mailbag questions as well. But I wanted to start here, Carlos. I wanted to start with something my buddy Bruce Feldman wrote for The Athletic that came out today. I don't know if some of you have had a chance to read this yet, but it's a college football playoff confidential where he polled more than 24 coaches from Power Four and Group of Five schools, asked them who's going to win it all. I love it when reporters like Bruce, national guys, get a chance to speak to head coaches and get some insights, right? Because they played against these teams, they coached against these guys before. He asked some good questions. Who's going to win it all? Who's the biggest fraud? Who's the best coach? Who's the sleeper? And I wanted to go over some of those results with you, Carlos. What do you think the national narrative among coaches is about Mario and this program?
I would say the national narrative is that he's an excellent recruiter, probably the best recruiter in the country, or if not the best, one of the best. Applause for Mario. One of the best. But that the game day coaching, the X's and O's, the actual execution on game day doesn't live up to the level or the standard that he brings in as a recruiter. I would assume that's the stigma around the program. Lots of talent, underachieving.
Right, and that pretty much I think sums it up from a specific to Mario perspective. And we're going to talk about my story that I wrote with Bruce related to that topic because there's some interesting facts about Mario that I wanted to talk about going into this game and matchups, etc. But let's start with Bruce's story, Carlos, because I thought there was some really good information in it. I'm going to present some of these slides here as we go because he kind of did it by topic, but this is the first one. Oh, no, that's the Mario story that I wrote. I apologize. Let me take
That one I
that
read
out.
because I only
That-
read the stuff that you write. Who the hell is Bruce Feldman? I don't know that guy.
You know who Bruce Feldman is. He's on Fox every single week
Yeah,
writing.
I own the book Kane Mutiny.
Yes, you do. All right, here is the first series of questions, I guess, that Bruce wrote about. Which team is the biggest sleeper in the field?
Oh, look at that.
Miami.
I like that.
Lot, lot of respect for the Hurricanes. I didn't expect that either. Let me see if there were any quotes from any of the coaches regarding the sleeper question here. This is from a Big Ten defensive backs coach. He said Oklahoma he thought was the biggest sleeper. I don't think they've had any movement on their staff or roster, and cohesiveness could play a key role in the playoff. Interesting that somebody mentions that because Miami has had a lot
Yep.
of cohesiveness. Here's another answer. This is from a Big Ten running backs coach. If Notre Dame was in, I'd have said them, to be honest. He says, I'll say Texas A&M. So even though Miami leads the biggest sleeper field, not a lot of support in terms of anything quotable from coaches. Oh, wait, here's one. This is from an ACC offensive analyst, Carlos. He says, Miami, their D-line is scary, and those guys can change a game. Receiver Malachi Tony is the most dangerous player in college football. I'm not sure how many people actually watch the ACC, but that kid is special. Notre Dame has a really good secondary, and they couldn't touch him. And he kept getting better and better as the season went on. They'll use him at quarterback, and he can throw. They'll line him up outside in the slot. No one can cover him. He's fast and super quick. They do so much stuff with him now. Thoughts?
Now, yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%. And I think that's one of the reasons that Miami's, in the lead here in terms of the sleeper. It's line play, specifically defensive line play. Because when you're in a system now in college football where most teams are going spread, most teams are in the shotgun most of the game, throwing the ball over the field, and using RPOs, how do you disrupt that? Right? You disrupt that by applying pressure, collapsing the pocket, and making the quarterback either get rid of the ball before he wants to, or try to escape the pocket and make a throw on the run. So that's why I think Miami's up there because they have the best defensive end tandem in the country to me. I think Texas A&M's got a great defensive line. They're great pass rushers. But to me, in terms of a complete total defensive lineman, those two defensive ends, Mesidor and Bain, are the best in the country. And I think the country realizes that, and they see that. And offensively, they've got a good offensive line. I think they're a little overstated in terms of being elite. I think they're really good. I don't think they're elite, but they do have an elite playmaker in Malachi Tony and a quarterback that has been in these situations before in Carson Beck. And if he continues the trend that he's had over the last 4 games and plays the way he's played in the playoffs before for Georgia, then this could be a really interesting run.
All right, I wanted to keep going through this here, looking at some more of these topics in terms of what Bruce asked these coaches. Who do you think will pull off an upset? Miami once again at the top, 58%, Carlos. I mean, I think at this point, like this is the first round. I mean, it's obvious Miami would be the team to pull off the upset.
Yeah, I think they're the ones they're in best position to do that. I think that's the most evenly matched game in the first round. Other in Oklahoma, Alabama, But to me, we've already seen that one, that Oklahoma Alabama game, and I think
Mhm.
Alabama's sort of limping into this game right now, following that ass kicking they took in the SEC championship game, and I don't see them overcoming Alabama. Like we said, I think Tulane has no damn shot. There's no way in hell. Neither is James Madison, and I think Miami is the one that you really focus in on because these two teams are so evenly matched.
The group of five tight ends coach said of Miami, he says, the reason I'm picking Miami over A&M, the Aggies are really good, but both their coordinators might be distracted, and Miami is really talented. And that's true. Both of their coordinators were hired away to go to other places. So that's something else that when you think about this matchup, that could disrupt Texas A&M's preparation.
Hey, I'll take it. I'll take anything. Hopefully they don't sleep well at night. Hopefully they don't have a memory foam mattress or a Serta sleeper.
They are at home in front of 110,000 people. All right, the next category from Bruce's story: which team would you least like to play? Miami's fourth. What do you think about that?
Again, it's one of those situations where you're facing a tough defensive line, and if you're a team that's predicated on the pass, you don't want to face that and put your quarterback in a situation that maybe even if you do come out with the win, the next round you may be screwed because they'll be beat up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of surprised, right? I mean, they're the 10th seed. People talk so much shit about them. Oh, Notre Dame should have made it, right? There's a lot of people out there that have said that. But yet, you ask the coaches, the team they would least like to play, Miami's fourth. That's ahead of Ole Miss. That's ahead of Oregon. That's ahead of other teams that are seated higher than them.
It's all about the Jimmies and Joes, bro. And Mario's brought in a lot of good Jimmies and Joes. The problem is, obviously, we've seen it. Game day execution doesn't always match the level of the Jimmies and Joes, and that's what drops games. But ultimately, coaches fear playing teams that are big, physical, and talented, and Miami's all of that.
All right, let's get to the last category here from Bruce's story that we wanted to tackle. Who do you think is the best coach in the playoff? You agree with that?
Yeah, that's actually exactly what I would maybe put Signetti in. I can't put Signetti ahead of Kirby Smart because Kirby's won national championships.
Right.
So I would go there. That would be fine. I think Ryan Day should now, after the shit he's taken for years, after finally breaking through and winning a national championship, maybe number two. Just because he's been consistent winning there, and now has got himself a title and is back in position to do it again. So I don't know. I think that not having Ryan Day in there to me is criminal.
All right, fair enough. I'm glad we kind of transitioned here to the coaching conversation because I wrote a story about Mario this week and whether or not he's a good coach. And I know a lot of people, there were some Hurricanes fans that had some not so nice things to say about me, Carlos, because they thought I was taking a
Shocker.
shot at him. I'm going to go over some of these messages in the comments from this story. And maybe it's ill timed, right? But look, the bottom line is my editors wanted this story because nationally, Carlos, it is a topic, right? A lot of people look at Miami's success and they snuff their nose and say, well, it doesn't matter. Mario's going to shit the bed. Miami's going to come out and lay an egg in the big moments because that's what Mario's teams do. So these are some of the comments I got. Only Manny Navarro would come out with this article at this time. He's an envious individual and puts it on Mario whenever he can. That's from Robert P. Another person said, Manny Navarro writes for The Athletic, but the question remains, is he a good writer? I like that. That was actually pretty good. Thank you for that one, Peter F. And then this is from Steven C. Love the anonymous thing when asking other coaches' opinions. The whole concept reeks of gossip and National Enquirer vibes. I'm not a fan of Miami at all. But to have an article like this at this stage of the season after he rallied his team to 10 wins in the playoff is a low blow, in my opinion. Indicative of the industry, I suppose, somehow, some way, having the uncanny ability to focus and accentuate the negative. Stephen C. So there you go. I voiced some of the negativity around this article, but the reason this article was written, Carlos, is because, as I mentioned, Mario has a history of choking in big moments, right? And so I looked it up. I started going over Mario's entire career, not just what he's done here at Miami and losing to Georgia Tech, because that's the infamous one everybody can point to, right? He didn't take a knee with time running down.
Which
Miami could
somebody in
have
the
run.
comments also said he did at Oregon as well.
Yeah, exactly. He's done it before. But this season, Carlos, Miami is 4-0 against ranked opponents. That's AP top 25 ranked opponents when they met. He's 5-6 now against top 25 teams. Yes, Manny Diaz did win an ACC championship before he did, but Miami made the playoff. But I asked Bruce, I said, Bruce, you're talking to all these coaches this week. Can you reach out and talk to some about Mario for this story? And of course, Bruce, being the guy he is, helped me out. I just wanted to read some of these quotes, Carlos. This is from somebody who was a head coach. It says, for what this era requires, he's a really good college head coach. A former college head coach said, because he has created an environment that has really good institutional support. He has alignment with his president. They evaluate players very well and spend money on the right kids. Now, is he a good in-game strategist? This is what the coach said. No. You're going to like this part. Shannon Dawson, his OC, is really good. But whenever things don't go well, Mario's instinct is to slow it down and run the ball. At times, they let teams hang around with them that shouldn't be hanging around with them because of it. He's one of those guys where if they throw a bad pick, he's probably telling his OC, I don't want to throw the ball again.
Yep. Well,
anything wrong with that coach's take in your mind?
I mean, we've said that all year long. We've said that for years, actually, since he took the job. I think it's first going back to the comments and the things that people said. I think it's so interesting that we live in an era nowadays where everybody has to feel strongly one way or another about things and instantly react and instantly have a triggered emotion about something instead of just receiving the information and being critical about it and thinking through it, right? I think if you're an objective fan, these criticisms are valid. It doesn't matter when they're brought up. And I would imagine when somebody's talking about the timing of this article, it's not like Mario's running for election somewhere or he's up for an extension or this is going to be considered in whether or not he keeps the job at Miami. He's going into his first playoff, right? He's coming off a season where he lost 2 games that he should not have lost. And he's backed his way into the playoffs. Thankfully, he's in there and he's got a chance to prove him wrong. So rather than using this as, hey, these are fair criticisms, now let's hope he proves that wrong and we can change the narrative moving forward, seeing that positively, we decide to shit on the messenger who had absolutely nothing to do with not kneeling against Georgia Tech, with losing to SMU in Louisville, with losing to Middle Tennessee. None of that shit, right?
Right.
Well, but hey, that's where we are today.
Listen, I appreciate the support, and look, people are entitled to their opinion. They can think whatever they want about me and my motives and why I write certain articles. Look, it's something I think nationally everybody's talking about outside of Miami, and I think
but you know what? The shit that bothers me is why do people automatically subscribe some sort of villainous sort of agenda or undertone to something that doesn't agree with their point of view? Automatically. That's not how life works, guys. You're going to go into places where people just don't agree with you or have different points of view, and they're not automatically the villain. They're just different.
Right. Absolutely. And look, there's a lot of people who feel this way about Mario. And look, I brought up a lot of points in this article. I wrote, look, he's got 94 wins, ranks 15th among all active head coaches, one behind PJ Fleck at Minnesota, one ahead of Jeff Brom at Louisville. He's 16 games above 500 in his career. He obviously helped turn FIU around, led them to back-to-back bowl games, won the conference, shared a conference championship, the Sun Belt at the time. And then, went 35-13. The problem is this, and this is the stat that blew me away, Carlos, because Mario's obviously a good coach. He does a great job building rosters, but this is the one that blew me away, and I didn't realize this till I looked it up. He's 54-20 while coaching a ranked team, okay? But 11 of those losses as a ranked team, he's had one each of the last 8 seasons to unranked opponents. And that's what taints Mario's career. It's not the fact that he can't win. He's won big games on the road. He coached Oregon to a win at Ohio State before he left there, okay? Miami's won tough road games with Mario here as coach. It's the losses that nobody expects. In 2018, Oregon lost on the road at Arizona. Arizona finished 5-7. In 2019, the team that won the Rose Bowl, that Mario coached the Rose Bowl win, they had a chance to get to the 14 playoff. What happened? He lost at Arizona State to Jaden Daniels, a team that finished 8-5. In 2021, they lost to unranked Stanford that finished 3-9. 2022 at Miami, lost to Middle Tennessee State when Miami was still ranked. 2023, the epic meltdown against Georgia Tech. And then the ones the last 2 years, Georgia Tech and Syracuse were technically unranked when they played Miami, and Louisville and SMU were both unranked, 8-4 teams. So that's what Mario gets knocked
against Syracuse.
Yeah, up 21-0 on Syracuse. So I think more than anything else, I wanted to shed light on what it is that Mario has stumbled at. It's not that he can't win against ranked teams. He's actually got a pretty good record. 7-7 at Oregon in ranked games and 5-6 at Miami. That's 500. There's a lot of guys that are worse than that in big games. It's the games that he's favored in and expected to win that his teams have letdowns that kill us, that kill him.
And that could point to a lack of focus against lesser opponents, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, James Franklin got fired for being subpar against top 10, top 15, top 25 teams. Mario has a much better record than James Franklin had, right, during that period. Now, here's the other thing, and I think this is why people get so insulted and they project in their mind. Just because Mario to this point has been inconsistent or underachieving long term in terms of winning the big games and not slipping up and losing to opponents that he shouldn't be losing to, doesn't mean that's going to continue in the future if he
Mm-hmm.
learns from those mistakes. And I think during the last 4 games of the season, we saw a different evolution of the offense that allowed him to step back. And he even mentioned it in a press conference. He sort of stepped back and allowed Shannon Dawson a little bit more freedom in terms of the play calling to do what they needed to do to finish off the season strong. If he continues to do that, if he then suddenly has this epiphany, this moment of, hey, listen, this is what it's going to take, my stepping back in certain areas and allowing my coaches to coach, then he could be successful. But also remember, these kinds of narratives happen around great coaches until they
Right.
win,
Right.
right?
People
Bobby
forget.
Bowden was considered Mario Cristobal for a long time until he won his first national championship in 1993, right? We
Mm-hmm.
have, Jim Harbaugh was there at Michigan for a long time before he even cracked the Big Ten championship and winning a national title. Most recently, Ryan Day. It didn't take him as long as Jim Harbaugh, but he was being maligned for losing to Michigan and not being able to win, right? He just won a
Right.
national championship. And even in our backyard, Jimmy Johnson was shit on for the first few years because he put up an 8-5, got destroyed by Tennessee, lost in the national championship to Penn State. There was this concern that Jimmy Johnson couldn't win the big game until he did, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it is what it is, man. All these questions surround you when you're at a level where you're expected, or there's this idea that you are supposed to be at a certain level, at a certain standard, and you're not reaching that yet. When you're in a competitive environment, there's going to be criticisms, there's going to be failings, but either you use it as fuel or you use it as a reason to sob and feel sorry for yourself. And I think right now, Mario, I think from what we've seen over the last 4 games, has taken an honest look at himself and look at this team and said, all right, these things need to change immediately if I want to get to where I want to go to. And right now they have the opportunity to show it. So whether or not you agree with the article, it is what it is. He's got to prove it. If he shits the bed on Saturday and they get blown out by Texas A&M, guess what? Those voices only get louder.
Yeah. Yeah. A couple of other comments from the story. This is from another ACC coach who coached against Mario. He said, I coached against them once when they had a lot more talent and we beat them. I think Cristobal is maybe the best recruiter in college football, but I don't think he's a good X's and O's coach. He hasn't played in the ACC championship yet, and they have the highest paid roster in the conference. There's something missing there. And to your point about Mario, he did talk about it with Kirk Herbstreit and Joey Galloway about sort of after that SMU loss, looking in the mirror, showed him a video of highlights, 15-minute highlights from earlier in the season, and he said it. He said, he played the video, he cut the lights. He says, it allowed us to come to game time, be able to cut it loose and have fun. That has always worked at Miami. I think it's taken me a little while to relearn that because I went away. So, the last sort of comment that I got from another former head coach said, there's these games where they're firing on all cylinders and they come out and score 50 or score 40 or 50 points, and Carson Beck is slinging it. But then they get in these games where if a ball gets tipped or they don't convert on a third down, or if it gets tight, they start playing tight. Mario's an old O-line coach, and most coaches, when the game gets tight, rely on the part of the game they're the expert of. Mario would like to win the game with his O-line and his backs, and they're really good. He can win 10 games in the ACC just like that. But if they're going to win a national championship or beat Texas A&M, you don't pay back $3 or $4 million to have them turn around and hand the ball off every time. So it's frankly a lot of the stuff we've talked about on the show before, right? But it's interesting to see other head coaches and other assistant coaches in the game that have gone up against them basically say the same stuff.
So basically, what you're saying is we're on the same level as these coaches, is what I just understood from you. That's all I'm
I'm not.
taking. That's my
I'm not.
takeaway. I don't
I'm
give a shit
not.
what I don't care what anybody thinks. That's my takeaway.
All right, Carlos. Let's get to another subject, and I don't want to end it on a downer because I want people to know I picked Miami to win this week.
Well,
I think that
clearly now you cheated and used NCAA football to tell you who's going to win.
I did that simulation after I made my picks on paper. I think Miami, look, they're playing really well right now. Texas A&M sputtered towards the end of the season. They're coming off a loss to Texas. I just think they didn't play great in November. Miami played great in November, right? And I think there's two different teams here. And I think, look, there's been a long break, obviously, between games. There's been 3 weeks between games, but I still think Miami has some mojo. And from what I gathered from talking to some people behind the scenes, they feel it. They feel there's a lot of confidence in that locker room right now. Plus, they're getting healthier. Tonight, around 8:15, the official injury report for the college football playoff for Miami, Texas A&M will be released. So if you're looking for injury updates, you'll see one there. But Keontae Scott could potentially be back in the lineup for Miami. Mario said as much this week. We know they're getting help in the secondary. So I think from a health perspective, this team is getting healthier. So is Texas A&M, by the way. They're getting healthier as well. Their running back is expected back for this game, and one of their top backs, and one of the top backs in the country. So I think, look, this is going to be a hell of a matchup, but I think Miami can win this game.
I believe so too. I'm very confident. I go in here expecting Miami to win this game. It's just going to be, I think, a slugfest. Though I think both teams, like I said, are evenly matched. As good as Miami's defensive line is, Texas A&M has a really good defensive line as well. They've got a great pass rush. Miami's got a good secondary. A&M has a really good secondary, and I think both quarterbacks have had their ups and downs throughout the season, but can be really good playmakers for their team in their own right, in their own way when they're on. Right. And Marcel Reed, to me, can do it in both, the passing game and with his legs. But ultimately, I think it's going to come down to who makes the least amount of mistakes. And I'm not even talking about just turnovers. Obviously, you can't turn the ball over and be negative turnovers in this situation. But you can't be committing penalties that kill drives or extend drives for the other team. And more than anything, specifically in this game, I think the team that has the least amount of third and longs will end up winning. Because if you're in third and long against either of these teams, that means that pass rush is coming, and that means you're in trouble. Right. I think ultimately Miami needs to be able to corral Marcel Reed and keep him from trying to escape the pocket when everything breaks down and force him to make throws. Right. You want him to stay in the pocket and try and deliver into tight windows, into coverage, and not be able to escape and make plays with his legs, because that's a big part of their offense. Ultimately, I think Miami can do that. I think the one question I have offensively is is Shannon Dawson coming in with a game plan that is suited to what they need to do to win this football game? And there's a lot of things that they need to do. To me, running the football is key, specifically with Pringle. Texas A&M has given up a lot of big runs this year. In their loss to Texas, they gave up over 200 yards. They gave up over 200 yards to Arkansas and almost lost that game. If they can run the football and go play action against Texas A&M, they are significantly increasing their chances of winning, because what you're ending up doing is, one, you're taking advantage of the fact that you've got a speedy back and getting him in on the edge against a team that's given up runs like that. Two, you are forcing that secondary now that's very highly touted, that's very good, if you are running the ball outside on the edge, to come down and get into run fits, right? That means
Mm-hmm.
you are taking them away from the back end of the defense, which allows you more one-on-one opportunities, right? And missed coverages and blown coverages, which you can play action off of and try and make big plays. And I think Miami needs to do that in early downs on first and second down, because they'll be facing more base coverages and base defenses in those early downs, as opposed to blitzes, right? Or schemes and coverage mix-ups. So they got to take advantage of that. I think defensively, the main thing they have to do is, aside from corralling Marcel Reed, is they need to protect the middle of the field. Marcel Reed loves to throw the ball in the middle of the field, and that's where Kenny Concepcion lives. 71% of Concepcion's targets are in the middle of the field, regardless of depth. 71%.
Wow.
Okay? That is an incredible amount. And Marcel Reed throws over 50% of his passes to the middle of the field. So what does that tell you? They're running a lot of slants, they're running a lot of crossers, they're running a lot of posts, and trying to get these guys open in the middle of the field. So the Hurricanes need to close off the middle of the field. How do you do that? You run some Tampa 2 with a modified variation. Tampa 2 is a cover 2 shell where you're playing cover 2, but you run what's called Mike down the pike, which is a middle linebacker sprinting down the middle of the field to eliminate anything crossing deep over the middle, right? That the Tampa Bay Bucks made that famous because, of course, they had Derek Brooks, and the guy was fast as a damn horse, and he can do that. But there's a modified version of that to the middle of the field, or you drop the safety down in the middle of the field and you have the corner take the half, and then you adjust accordingly with the remainder of your defense. I think they need to do that. They need to run some cover 3 robber, which is 3 deep, right? You're closing off the middle of the field with a middle high safety. but then you're also using a robber, which is robbing the middle of the field, somebody creeping in to take over any crossing routes in there to try and clog that up. And do the same when you go cover two man, cover one man, use a robber concept where you're trying to eliminate the middle of the field.
Man, you put on a lesson there. That was I hope everybody was taking notes because you basically laid it out there as clean as can be. I love that.
Hey, listen, this is what I do, bro. Been doing this all season, but it's playoff time, so I had to step it up. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, make sure you tune in to Carlos. That little portion there, if you want to hit the rewind button and listen for the last 5 minutes, he was going on and on and on about just what the keys are to this game. So when you look for a breakdown, I don't think you'll find a better one than that anywhere. All right, that was as good as it
Thank you, bro.
gets. All right, let's talk a little bit about free agency, Carlos, because this week we had a bunch of quarterbacks hit the transfer portal, and there are people out there speculating who is Miami going after. Who should they try to bring in to replace Carson Beck? I know there's some fans out there that still feel like they should give the freshman on this team an opportunity to win the job. But knowing Miami and the fact that they have not spent a lot of money on the quarterback position on among the high school ranks, they're going to be looking in the portal to find somebody. And so I wanted to put together here a list for us to sort of examine of the top returning quarterbacks for next season in college football. And it's all based on passing efficiency, Carlos. You can see some of those guys will not be leaving. I'm not putting a list of everybody entering the transfer portal. Dante Moore will probably be leaving for the NFL. Darian Mensah could be leaving for the NFL as well. It's there's going to be a lot of movement, I think, here in the weeks ahead. But these are the guys that should be back next season, and amongst the guys that Miami, I think, is interested in. Okay, you got CJ Bailey there. You can see where he ranks. You see Lenora Sellers. I wish I could get these freaking overlays off the screen so you guys can read this in some way, shape, or form. Without there we go. Took the crap off the screen. Um, Caton Hauser's another guy who's in the portal from East Carolina. He's 13-6. These are numbers from the last two seasons combined, by the way. You can see where Marcel Reed ranks. He's 15-5 as a starter, 40 touchdowns, 16 interceptions. Mensa leads all the quarterbacks, I believe, with touchdown passes combined the last two seasons with 52. This is the first list. I'm going to flash another one here for you in a second. When you look at the quarterback position and guys that will be back next year, again, more will probably be gone. How important is this pickup, Carlos, for Miami?
I think this is huge because we've talked about this on the show before. I don't think that Shannon Dawson's a very good quarterback coach or developer. We haven't seen him do that yet. I don't think he's done a good job with the guys that he's had when they've been there. So I think he's more of an offensive coordinator that's ready built for a transfer portal guy. He's not going to be the guy that coaches your guy up into a stud. He's not the kind of guy that takes a 3-star quarterback or somebody that's all right and develops them into a star. He's basically going to take what they have and just continue to keep them status quo for the most part. So they need to not only find a star quarterback, they need to find a star quarterback that fits their system and what they want to do. And from what I understand, they want somebody a little bit more athletic so they could play +1 ball and also buy time, sort of like Cam Ward did. And they need that sort of athleticism to expand the offense and do a little bit more than they wanted to do. So I think it's huge for them. I also think there's a lot of guys returning on this team that could push this team to another big playoff run if they fill those holes that are going to be missing with top tier transfer portal talent and just plug the holes. I think they can make another run and maybe be even better next year than this year because the schedule is even more favorable than it was this past season. So this quarterback get is huge for me. I think there's an interesting name that just came out there. I was banging the drum for DJ Lagway for a long time. He had a rough season, but I think a lot of that had to do with the way the offense was being called. I also think that he was hurt coming into the season, missed the spring, didn't have a really a good chance to get acclimated before the season started, and that injury maybe lingered a little bit too long early in the year. He was much better towards the end of the season, and you could see the talent the guy has. He's a live arm, very athletic, hard to bring down. That's the kind of guy you like. I'm not saying they're going to go with DJ Lagway, but I wouldn't be opposed to it. Sam Levitt, also another guy from Arizona State, great arm, good-looking guy. Like I said, he'll be in trouble down here. I know there's a lot of fine chicks out in Arizona State, but down here, this is the NFL, my friends. Those of you that do not live down here in South Florida, if you think Arizona State has the best chicks in the country or California, my man, you have not stepped foot in South Florida. You're in a whole heap of trouble down here, Sam. And he's going to be the main recipient of all that attention as soon as he sets foot. As soon as he gets off that plane at MIA, automatically at the baggage claim, he's getting hit up. All right, everywhere. There, it's just the international house of pancakes or booty cakes in this case. You got Brazil, you got Colombia, you got Venezuela, you got Cuba, you got it all, brother. You got the Caribbean, Jamaica, the Bahamas, Haiti, whatever you want is down here. So that's a problem for Sam Levitt.
Well,
But he's a great quarterback. He's athletic.
yeah, no, he is, and he obviously led his team to the playoffs, so that's an important factor. So look, these are the top guys. I
And let me
think.
give you one more name that I think is not a
Okay.
top guy that everybody's talking about, but I find interesting is Aiden Childs from Michigan State. Really athletic guy, live arm, wasn't as productive as they wanted at Michigan State, but I think some of that had to do with the horrific offensive line play at Michigan State. And he's got a buddy that's a wide receiver that's pretty damn good that's in the portal too. So if you want to go 2-for-1, I think that'd be a good way to look.
Yeah, you're talking about Nick Marsh, the wide receiver from Michigan State. Well, look, these are the top names, and you're going to hear this for the next week or two before these guys end up with landing spots because these quarterbacks don't stay out there very long. People start overpaying and reaching deals and that sort of thing. Brennan Sorsby from Cincinnati, you see him there at the top of the list. 12-12 as a starter the last few years, but he had his moments this season. Completing 62% of his 63% of his passes over the last two seasons, 45 touchdowns, 12 picks, is a mobile quarterback. And from what I have gathered, Miami wants somebody who is a little bit more mobile. Sam Levitt, who you talked about, 16-4 as a starter, got injured this season, by the way, Carlos, 34 touchdowns, 9 picks over the course of the last two seasons, but is coming off an injury, 61% completion percentage. 7.7 yards per attempt. Obviously, Dylan Raiola is a big name that is out there because he is a former number one overall recruit. You see him there from Nebraska. 13-9 as a starter over the last 2 years. He's also coming off an injury, 31-17 touchdown, 31 touchdowns, 17 picks. Didn't really have a ton of success, to be honest. I think Nebraska sort of underwhelmed a little bit at times with him. DJ Lagway, who you mentioned, I think those are the top four names right now in the transfer portal. Some other names to know, obviously Drew Mestamaker from North
Love him.
Texas.
Probably going to Oklahoma State.
Yeah, Colton Joseph from Old Dominion put up some really, really good numbers. His head coach is probably going to end up becoming a coordinator somewhere at a Power Four school. We'll see what happens with that. But as you look at the list here, Julian Sand, CJ Carr. I mean, those are going to be two guys returning next season for sure. With high expectations. So right off the bat, Notre Dame and Ohio State are going to be ranked really, really high. Damon Williams, we'll see what happens with his coach. Jed Fish could end up going to Michigan to take over there. We'll see what happens with the Michigan job. But Damon Williams is a very highly rated guy, 9-6 as a starter, 33 touchdowns, 9 picks. Byron Brown is another interesting name, Carlos. I think he has 1 year of eligibility left. I think everybody just assumes he's going to go to Auburn to meet up with his head coach Alex Golish. We'll see where he ends up if he ends up getting what he needs to play next season. Austin Simmons is another interesting name. I think he might be on his way to LSU with Lane Kiffin, and then of course our boy CJ Bailey. And Lenora Sellers, I guess he's already said he's going to go back to South Carolina, but money talks and bullshit walks, Carlos,
Right.
and we'll see if anything changes with that. But I mean, obviously this is going to be a critical time. I just wanted you all to have a list of all the quarterbacks that were out there, that potentially returning next season, and whether or not they end up in the same exact place. Nico Iamaleava, by the way, if you look at his numbers, 13-11 as a starter, 32 touchdowns, 12 picks, down there at the bottom of the list in terms of passing efficiency. When you see this list, right, and you see all the top guys, I mean, it's saying. I mean, Notre Dame and Ohio State have to be the favorites coming back next year, right?
I would say so. Yeah, I mean, CJ Carr's had a really good year as a first-year starter. Julian Sand, obviously, did a great job for them. They always have a talent pipeline at Ohio State, and if they really want to reach in the portal and go get a quarterback of their own, they could always do that. But they always seem to produce quarterbacks that everybody's taking from them, right?
Right.
Starting back with Joe Burrow, somebody picking up Joe Burrow and winning a national title with him. So Ohio State can recruit. They're always going to be in the mix. I think Notre Dame will definitely have to replace Jordan Love and figure something out there. But I think they're set at quarterback with CJ Carr. And we'll see. I mean, we'll see moving forward. But there's an opportunity, I think, with the rest of the field to make a move. Even Indiana, who's been so good the last couple of years, Fernando Mendoza now after winning the Heisman, moving on to the NFL. Can his brother match that production? Do they go out and get another quarterback in the portal? If that happens, does his brother Alberto move on to another program? Does he decide to maybe go transfer it to a program that's a little bit closer to wherever Fernando gets drafted to make things easier on their mother? Who knows? We'll see what happens there.
Yeah, there'll be a lot of interesting quarterback movement in the next few weeks.
Which I would feel bad for Alberto, man. If Fernando ends up getting drafted by the Jets and he's got to go play for Rutgers and get shit kicked for the rest of his time in the Big Ten, that'd be horrible.
That's pretty sure he's going to stay at Indiana. Whether or not, I mean, Indiana's probably going to go out and get a quarterback too. I'm guessing. I mean, after you bring in a guy and he wins the Heisman Trophy, it makes it kind of easy, doesn't it, to recruit a quarterback?
Yeah, absolutely. But let's say Fernando ends up at Vegas, right, with the Raiders. UNLV's not a bad spot with Dan Mullen as the coach.
Yep. All right. A little bit of news on the side related to the ACC that came out earlier this week, Carlos. I mentioned to you guys for weeks now that Miami was going to be one of the teams playing 9 ACC games next season. And that's exactly what happened. The slate for next season was released. I'm going to copy this little graphic here if I can. So you can see Miami's 9 ACC games on the screen pretty easily. Let me see if I can put it up here. 1 second. Here we go. That is Miami's schedule, ACC schedule for next season. You can see that they've got a big matchup there with defending, reigning ACC champion Duke at home that has been added to the schedule. So Boston College at home, Florida State at home, Pitt at home, Virginia Tech at home. I would say of those 5, if Duke brings back Mensa, that'll be a good game. Pittsburgh, I would assume, would be the other one. They'll still have their quarterback back, and I'm sure they'll do a good job, filling some holes.
Virginia Tech will be much better.
Virginia Tech should be better with their new head coach, so we'll get a chance to see James Franklin down here. And then of the road games, I'm very interested to see if any of them are challenging because Clemson, quite frankly, has so much to do coming off of a 7-5 season. I'm very interested to see what they do and how active they are in the portal. Wake Forest, had a good season this year. But again, not a team that should really be difficult. Stanford's going to have a new head coach, and of course, the Fighting Bill Belichick's, right? So interesting.
Yeah, for me, that Stanford game is interesting. If they're playing a night game in Stanford, I hate those late West Coast games for an East Coast team. Your body's normally adjusted and used to sleeping, or in this case, these kids probably out partying, not being on a football field, hammering each other away.
Yeah, Miami, of course, has a November 7th date at Notre Dame. We already mentioned CJ Carr should be back for Notre Dame. They do have to replace Jeremiah Love, but
Manny, what would you put the over under on amount of bullshit calls Miami's going to get in that game against Notre Dame following this college football snub by the Irish?
I'm guessing the number's pretty high, Carlos. I'm just guessing. It's at least 3, right? There's going to be at least 3 in that game that I'm sure shaped the contest.
If we thought Cleveland Gary was egregious, I think we're going to see one even more egregious this game.
All right, let's get to the mailbag question segment here, Carlos, because we've got other things to do today. It is holiday season. Have you done all your Christmas shopping? Have you gotten everything done?
Yeah, my wife got all that done. I participate in 0. The only thing I do is give her the okay. What do you think? Yeah, I like it. And then buy her a present. But other than that, I try to stay away from the gift giving. And thank God for Amazon because we haven't had to leave the house for it or mostly online shopping. So we've gotten it all done. The thing I am doing today though is my daughter has her Advent show. And unfortunately, because my wife also teaches at the school, she's got to be there at 2:00 in the afternoon to be there with her class as they run through one last time, a dress rehearsal at the stage. Mm-hmm. They then have to eat there and get dressed there. And the show starts at 6. So they're not leaving till 8:00 at night when that show is over.
It's a long
And
day
guess
for
what
them.
happened? For
What?
them, guess what happened? I
No.
was told that I needed to volunteer because if they're going to suffer, I need to suffer along with them. So I am now a volunteer at the show. So I too am going to be suffering during all this time. And the athletic director, who's also the AV guy and PE coach, has drafted me to pick up Flanagan's for the staff. So I'm getting paid to go. Well, I'm not
Well,
getting paid.
we're gonna make it a little bit more cheery in here since you just shared that tough news for yourself with some
Thank you.
more
Thank you. At least there's
Christmas
free
cheer.
Flanagan's involved, so I'm good with that.
All right, Carlos, let's get to our mailbag questions. This is from Sadi Raza on Twitter, Dr. Sadi Raza. How concerned are you about the linebackers versus Texas A&M? I feel in the Louisville game they got exposed somewhat in coverage. Thank you.
It's going to be difficult. I think they need to try and keep the linebackers away from being matched up with Concepcion. I don't know if their running backs are great in the pass game. To me, their two receivers are the ones that make it go in the passing game. And I think the most important thing, aside from anything, my main concern is the backers trying to tackle Marcel Reed in open space. Right? If he gets outside of the pocket and tries to make plays with his legs, 65% of all of Marcel Reed's rushing yards are through scrambles.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like they're running a ton of zone reads and getting him in action. They do get him in action in the run game, but they don't do a ton of that. Most of what he does is just by breaking the pocket and getting out there and making plays on his own and improvising. So they need to watch that. And if he does run some zone read, he likes to run it to the left side. Just letting you know, Canes. All right, write that down. Write that down, Corey Heatherman. The left side. Okay.
All right. Thank you for the breakdown. I think without question, you look at Miami's defense, the linebackers is the weakest area, right? I mean, the secondary has played really, really well, I thought, for the most part. And the defensive line, has stayed gap integrity, right? They haven't really had many long runs by opposing quarterbacks this season, if any. I mean, can you
Yeah.
think of any?
No. Brown was
CJ
shut
Carr
down pretty good.
probably,
Drones had some good runs. I think Drones was the one that ran the best against them.
right?
So that was a little bit concerning for me. Ultimately, I think the team on either side, not only do they need to cut down the mistakes they had on third and long and all that kind of stuff that I mentioned earlier, but I think the team whose nickel plays best wins also. I think that's another key factor because that nickel's matched up on the slot guy, which would be Concepcion, which would be Malachi Tony. So the way you find ways to get Tony the ball, and the same thing with Concepcion, if that nickel can match that, if you're playing man, whoever plays best and acquits themselves best in that matchup ends up helping their team win. With Keontae Scott coming back from an injury, is he healthy enough to slow down Kenny Concepcion? If not, that backup nickel that they're playing, it was if Fitzgerald or whoever they're going to slide in there to cover Concepcion and man to man. What they do? Are they good enough to really slow him down and really manipulate their coverage to confuse Marcel Reed?
It's going to be a fabulous thing for me to watch in person, Carlos. I will be there, way up above, rocking in the press box, the press box that swings because of how much that stadium rattles. You feel it in the press box. I will be feeling that on Saturday, I'm sure for sure.
12th man is no
Uh,
joke. I'll be swinging too, but only because I've had 15 beers by noon.
all right, this is from Columbus Kane. Do you think the running game gets rolling on Saturday? And besides Malachi Tony and our defensive ends, who will the X factor be on both sides of the ball?
On offense, it has to be Elijah Lofton and Alex Bauman. I think the tight ends need to be huge in this game. I think the secondary for Texas A&M is very good, and they will probably lock up the outside receivers Miami, who have not been dynamic against most teams. C.J. Daniels was early on in the season. Hopefully, when he comes back now this game, he's been back, but is back to 100% this game and can make some plays. But I think the opportunity here is with the tight ends and the running backs, using them off play action to help Carson Beck really draw in the defense and throw behind that. If they can get Elijah Lofton and Bauman and the backs the ball in the flats in the short range passing game, they'll keep the chains moving. I think that keeps drives alive if they're not able to run the ball very well. But like I said, not only do they need to run the ball, it's not the same A gap shit that we've seen all season. The things that we've seen develop over time now with Pringle getting outside, that needs to be a factor because, like I said, they need to get that secondary to come in and to run fits and take advantage of that. And offensively, also, I think they need to continue to use motion, different formations, and to try and not only identify coverages for Carson Beck to make it easier for him to read, but also to confuse Texas A&M on the back end a little bit. So go a little bit more 4 wide, 5 wide, bunch sets, and motion Malachi Tony to get him on the move, make him harder to cover, and also create coverage identifiers so you can clearly see what the coverage is and spin the coverage into a structure that's favorable for you so you can take advantage of the numbers where you want them.
We need to get you in a game. That's what we need to do. You're very excited about this match. Like you
Listen,
have you're at a different level today.
It's playoff time, and more importantly, speaking of college football, NCAA 25, I went to a buddy's house this weekend. His son had the game. I hadn't played since NCAA 14, so I haven't touched a controller in all those years. And I was having a great time, but I got my ass whooped 28-0 by the half, and I was not happy. I need to now buy a PlayStation 5 and practice repeatedly until I kick that kid's ass.
You just got to come over to my house, brother, and we'll throw down.
I'm gonna have to do it one on it. Then you're gonna run me over too. No, I'm gonna buy one first, practice, and then go play you.
My X factor for this game, believe it or not, it's Keelan Marion and CJ Daniels, because we know Malachi Tony is going to get a ton of attention. Those guys have to create space in the secondary. I know the running backs and tight ends have to be good too, but I think if those guys are not creating separation, and that's a very good secondary they're going up against, then you're forced to rely on the tight ends and running backs to deliver consistently. And I think Carson Beck wants to throw the ball down the field. I think the running game has success because he can throw the ball down the field, and the defense has to respect the over the top ball. And to me, that's where Daniels and Marion come in. They've got to hit a couple of those balls down the field. Malachi
Or
Tony
at the
should
very
not.
least, even if they don't hit him, threaten him with it.
Right. There has to be that threat, because to me, that's the running game. And then I would say on the defensive side of the ball, it's Ruben Bain. He has to be elite in this game,
And
making
Mesidor.
Marcel Reed feel uncomfortable, because those receivers are going to get open. They're good enough. These are the
Yeah.
best receivers Miami has faced. I think Ruben Bain has to be on his P's and Q's in this game to at least draw double teams and triple teams or whatever it takes. If that Trey Zune guy, the left tackle, the one who said that he was going to dominate him or not dominate, he didn't say he was going to dominate him. He just said he wasn't really worried about him. If they're not worried about Ruben Bain, Carlos, and that's the way this game really ends up, then Miami's not going to win. Ruben Bain has to be a factor in this game. He has to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only do they need to be a factor, he and Mesidor, but they need to be a factor in a controlled fashion, meaning they can't just fly upfield because Texas A&M may bait them to do that to be able to have Marcel Reed escape and do some things with his legs. So they need to maintain rush integrity, the rush lane integrity, and make sure that they are not just straight collapsing the pocket and letting Reed get outside of them. They need to force him to the help, right? Stay in front of him, force him to the sideline, allow secondary help to come in and make tackles on him. The other guys that need to step up are the safeties, right? Because you're going to get a lot of those crossing routes with the Texas A&M receivers, particularly Concepcion. You need to come up and be able to make tackles on the first attempt, not miss. So we got to hit, wrap, and get him down, and not allow big plays after that, because Concepcion has a lot of yards after the catch. I know it's one of your favorite categories, Manny. He gets a lot of yak.
He does. All right, Coach Leather. We're going to move on to the next question. Jake Campbell, the one coach soup, says, Manny, I read your piece on Mario being a good coach yesterday. It was good. That said, 4 years into the Mario Miami era, what grade would you guys give him, taking everything into consideration? Jake says, I'd say A minus based on recruiting, trajectory, the floor being raised, development, and yes, coaching. What grade do you give Mario at this point?
B plus. I think he's just beneath an A. I think for me, the continued losses against teams that he shouldn't lose against is the issue. I think had he lost to, let's say, SMU on the road, who at that point had only lost one ACC game, and Notre Dame at the start of the year, acceptable. You're losing against the team at the beginning of the season that was just coming off an appearance in the national championship game, top 15 team, top 10 team, and you lost to an SMU team who was in the playoff the year before, had only lost one game in conference to that point. Hey, it happens, right? But to blow the game against Louisville at home because of turnovers, because you didn't prepare, you didn't seem like you were into the game early on, and then follow that up 2 games later with a loss to SMU almost immediately, not immediately, but almost immediately, made it seem like, hey, there's the mental aspect of this team is not 100% sound. And that seems to be the theme year after year. And you can even point to it throughout the season with all the penalties and mental mistakes they make.
Yeah, I think I would have to give him a B as well, just because they haven't won the conference championship yet, and he was brought in to win championships. Now, if they go on a playoff run here and they really elevate themselves from a back-to-back 10-win team to a legitimate national championship threat, and the entire image of the program changes, then I'd give him an A, because that's what his job was. His job was to come in here and not just win back-to-back 10 games and get to double digits consistently, but to elevate the program back to national status. And even though they're in the playoff, Carlos, I think people still look at Miami as a B program.
Yeah.
So until he makes them an A program, they're a B program, and his grade is a B.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that perception also has to do with the fact that they were selected over Notre Dame, and there was a lot of people that are big Notre Dame fans.
Right.
Also, Notre Dame's campaign in the media to feel slighted and making Miami seem like they weren't as good as they were to be able to get in the playoff. I think what changes the perception for you. Is it just one win? Is that enough against A&M to say they've accounted for themselves, and then a good second round game against Ohio State, or do they have to win at least 2 games before you say, okay, they beat A&M, they beat a really good Ohio State team, but they ended up coming up short against Georgia. What do you think is sort of the tipping the scale? Where does it tip for that perception for you?
It's a good question. I don't know. I think it's just a feeling, right? Like if they win this game Saturday, they beat Ohio State. I think that's going to get people to sort of open their eyes and say, "Whoa, they're back, right? The U is back." But then if they go the following week and get smashed by Georgia, right, in the semifinals, then people are like, "Well, maybe they caught Ohio State sleeping, right? Maybe
Right.
Ohio State's." So it's whatever narrative you want it to be. For me personally, seeing what Marcus Freeman did last year with Notre Dame, where he took them all the way to the national championship game, I think getting back to the national championship game would solidify it, right? Like, there's no doubt Miami is a contender again if you get to the national championship. I think if they win a game or two, people are going to say, whoa, okay, this is for real, right? Miami didn't just slide in. But I think getting to the championship puts it on a different scale, right? It puts the program on a, hey, you're Notre Dame now, right? Notre Dame was just in the championship. Now Miami's in the championship. Like, to me, that's how I view it. You don't get to the championship. I mean, look, Texas 2 years in a row got to the semifinals. How do people feel about Texas as after this season? Right? They didn't even make the playoff. Do they feel like Texas is back? No, they're still like, no, Texas still isn't back. So I kind of make that comparison when I look at it.
Right, and I also think it's part of that is looking at the roster and seeing what's coming up the following year and see if it's sustainable, and then the years to come.
Right.
Um, I think if they beat Ohio State, then that to me shows that they're for real, right? If they ended up
Hmm.
getting to the semifinal and losing a tough one to Georgia, then everybody will look at them and say, okay, this is a program that's on the rise and they're moving forward. Yes, they're losing their quarterback. Yes, they're losing Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor. But with his ability to recruit and acquire talent, they'll be back here again next season, probably. And depending on who they get a quarterback, they may be even making a deeper run.
Yep. And let's get through some more of these here, Carlos. This is from Freedom PF Hop 20 on Twitter. The main thing that worries me for this game is the scrambling by the quarterback from A&M. Is our defense fast enough to control that? And what would be your approach to defend the Aggies? Can we do it? Also, a portal question: who are your top three QBs if you were Mario? Let's start with defending the Aggies. We kind of talked about it earlier, Carlos. What, just down and dirty, what would your approach be? You have to have somebody keying on him, right, the whole game.
Well, not necessarily. I think what you need to do is play zone, play some zone behind him because what ended up happening this season, for whatever reason, he was better, Marcel Reed, against the blitz than against no blitz when he was pressured. So that means
Hmm.
teams that were able to get pressure on him with the front four were able to force him into more mistakes than when they were bringing pressure against him.
Hmm.
Versus the blitz, he completed 60% of his passes for 14 touchdowns and 1 pick. That's
Right.
pretty impressive against the blitz, right? When he's
Hmm.
not blitzed, he's got a 62.5% completion percentage, 11 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. That's a big difference there. So he's no longer elite when he's getting pressure when he's not blitzed. And then when he's under pressure with no blitz, he's only completing 45% of his passes. So to me, it's one of these situations where you got to get Marcel Reed to process, to read the field, to go through his progressions, and then if you could pressure him naturally, which the Canes are set up to do with Mesidor and Bain, then he'll make mistakes. And I think in terms of trying to stop him from scrambling, you need to play a zone structure so the defensive backs' eyes aren't turned, right? Their backs aren't turned to the ball. They're facing the ball while still playing their zone responsibility, and it's easier for them to come up and make a play as secondary support from the defensive line. I think the backers also need to be aware of what Marcel Reed is capable of and make sure they're but coming up in a controlled way where they're not just trying to sprint and kill him, but corral him and allow secondary help to make sure that he doesn't break that contain.
Excellent breakdown again, Carlos. As far as the top three QBs, I'll tackle that one. I think they want more mobility. I mentioned that earlier. I think Levitt brings that. I think Sorsby brings that.
Hmm.
I think After that, you know, look, part of the problem is Oregon's probably going to get the first choice of quarterback, right? Of all those guys. So we will see what, how Oregon does in this playoff, and assuming Dante Moore leaves for the NFL, which I think he will. But we'll see. We'll see. I think those are the top two in my mind. And then after that, maybe Dylan Raiola, maybe, DJ Lagway, if that's what's sort of left. But my first two choices would be Sorsby and Levitt.
Yeah. I think, like I said, I like Aiden Charles, but I think he's more of a developmental guy. I think he needs a quarterback coach that can really work with him. I think
Mm-hmm.
Oregon, Kentucky, LSU would be great landing spots for him. He can make some noise at those programs. I would really like either Levitt or I like Lagway. I really like Lagway. I think he needs the right system down here, and he could be really successful. But again, even a guy like CJ Bailey, I think CJ Bailey's got a lot of talent. He's got a lot of ability, and maybe hasn't been tapped or hasn't been in the right system for him to tap that yet. Kind of like Cam Ward was at Washington State, or even Mateer, as he was at Washington State, hadn't really reached his full potential. So I think there's an opportunity there. So who knows? I think they're going to. I think the most important thing is they need to find a guy that fits a system they want to run, and they can bank on for at least 1 to 2 years while the other quarterbacks develop behind him.
This is from Armando Zagiri. Who are the players you feel most confident to play well Saturday? Who are you most worried about in this pressure cooker of a game?
Listen, Malachi Tony's going to show up. He always does. I have no doubt about that. I know Ruben Bain's going to show up. He always does. So those two guys, I'm fairly certain are going to play well. To me, concern Carson Beck. Does Carson Beck go out there and force the ball? Does he try to prove that he's a first-round pick and try to do too much? Or does he take what the defense gives him, as he's been doing over the last 4 games, where he's completed over 70% of his passes, and just move the chains along and be that guy that isn't flashy, that isn't necessarily explosive, but he takes what the defense gives him and helps his team win. And then when the opportunity presents themselves, then you go ahead and take the shots and you make the big plays. So to me, that's who I'm concerned about on offense is Carson Beck. Defensively, I'm concerned about the nickel spot. Is Keontae Scott healthy if he plays? If not, his replacement, can they handle Concepcion? How do you handle that? Also, not only does the nickel do a lot in terms of covering the slot, but like we saw Keontae Scott throughout the season, he's a big-time blitzer. He's great in run support. Do you fill that gap then, and against a team like Texas A&M with a mobile quarterback, with that second guy that's stepping in for Keontae Scott to be able to be in there in the run fits as well?
Yeah, I agree with all of those takes, Carlos. Obviously, the injuries in the secondary, you worry a little bit about those guys coming back. What kind of guy are you getting in that situation? But to me, it's the kicker, Carter Davis. Guy has a strong as hell leg. He was really good in the video game last night, but he's also missed some kicks this season. And I just think this is a pressure cooker type game that might come down to a kick. And
Yep.
those are the guys I worry about. I'm not worried about Carson Beck per se, because I think he's played in loud environments. So I think he'll be a calming force. But you're right. If he gets into the wrong mentality and is trying to force things, then he could be the guy who costs you the game. So, all right. This is from Sam Knowlton. It's getting late in the cycle for coaching hires, and Dawson and Heatherman are likely locked in for next year. How long will Jason Taylor stick around before he wants a bigger role? I don't know what's going to happen with Dawson. There's obviously still some more coaching moves to be made throughout college football. We mentioned the Michigan job, right? And who ends up getting hired there and what they do, and the way that leads to other dominoes falling and other openings. Dawson has interviewed a ton of places, has not gotten hired. I think he's going to be here next year, but I wouldn't rule it out and say it's over and done with. And then as far as Jason Taylor is concerned, I don't think he wants a bigger role. I don't think this is a guy who's pushing to be a defensive coordinator. This is a guy who won in the NFL, had a lot of success, is a Hall of Famer. I don't think being a defensive coordinator is something that he's pounding the table for.
Yeah, and more importantly, I don't think he's looking to make a move from South Florida. I
Right.
think now he's on he has a new wife that he's had for the last few years. He's got a younger child now. He has made a home in South Florida. His family has made a home in South Florida. His older kids are now graduating college, getting to that point where they're out. Maybe they circle back home. He wants to maybe have that freedom to be able to see them play. I don't think being a head coach somewhere or defensive coordinator somewhere else will help him do that. So for me, I think this is where home is and where he wants to stay now. If that opportunity grows organically and happens organically, I think that's something he'd definitely explore. But I think for now, his his motivations are different than most coaches.
Yeah, I agree. All right, this is from Kane Finn. Mario seems a lot more loose since making the playoffs. Does he feel like he got the monkey off his back by getting this team into the college football playoff? There's certainly some sense of relief, I'm sure, from Mario that in year 4 he was able to get the team into the playoff. There's no question about that. But I don't think there's a sense of getting the monkey off his back. He knows that he was brought here to win championships, and I don't think you're going to see him just sort of relax and say, "Oh, that's it, we made it." You know.
Yeah, I think the butthole is unpuckered a little bit. It's no longer turning coal into diamonds. I think it's a little bit looser, but he still has a lot to prove.
Vic Vassell has 2 questions for us. Do you think Miami scores 30 points or more? And do you think Miami can run for 200 yards as a team Saturday? I think Miami can score 30 points or more on this defense. 200
Only
yards
because the
rushing.
game said so, right? Only because of the simulation said so.
No, I just think Texas A&M has been involved in some high scoring games this season defensively.
Yeah.
They've given up more than 30. Like if this was a team, if this was Georgia or Ohio State or Indiana, I'd say hell no. Like there's no way Miami's going to score 30 points against those teams, right? Those teams grind it out. They play low scoring games for the most part in these kind of matchups. I think they can score 30 points or more. Can they get to 200 yards rushing? Probably not. I think if they do, they're going to win easily.
Yeah, I think if they're going to score over 30, I think they need to run over 200 yards. I think that's going to be the game plan because that's the teams that have beaten them, like the team that beat them in Texas and the teams that scored a bunch of points. Arkansas particularly did that. They've only given up over 30 3 times this season, but I think Miami could do it. I think the score is somewhere around 31, 24, 27 in that range, Canes.
I'm going with the video game score, Carlos. 37-28. I'm going to just go with the video game. Cuddy Bag says, this is the last question. With Texas A&M doing all the talking, do we have a repeat of the Cotton Bowl? Is someone getting knocked off on the kickoff, and do they have a new Miami celebration rule afterwards? Boots to asses, says Cuddy Bag.
Listen, I got my boots shined up. They're ready to go. And I'm waiting to put it in somebody's ass. I don't think this is as bad as what Texas was doing during that Cotton Bowl. Texas was talking mad shit before that Cotton Bowl, and we're talking about a different era of hurricane back in those days. So no, I do not anticipate anyone getting knocked out on the opening kickoff. There's no more Baileys on this team anymore, unfortunately. There's some hard-nosed dudes. Will they get popped? Will there be a lot of contact? Will they be excited? Will there be a lot of pads popping and helmets clapping? I think so, but I don't think it's going to be like it was back in the 90s.
Yeah, I don't either. I think it's going to be a close, hard-fought, loud, scary environment for 4 quarters and maybe overtime. And I think this is going to be the best game of the weekend. That's what I'm expecting.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be a fantastic game, and I think it's a great opportunity for the Hurricanes and for the fan base to really enjoy this playoff, get into it, and be in a matchup that's like a nail biter from start to finish. I've missed being in those games of consequence. I've had too many games where nail biters against teams that you shouldn't be in a game against. Being in a nail biter in a game with some consequence, something that there's some stakes attached to it, would be very exciting.
All right. He is Carlos Ledo of the MIA All-Day podcast. I'm Manny Navarro of The Athletic. I will be in Houston starting Friday, then driving up to College Station for the game, be back Sunday. We will have a show next week, one way or the other, victory or defeat. And I'm sure we'll be talking about quarterbacks and the transfer portal. Carlos?
We'll be talking about victories, baby. We're talking about the second round matchup next week against Ohio State.
All right. That's the positivity from Carlos. I bring the negativity according to everyone else. We will see you next week on Wide Right.
Peace.